National Prosecuting Authority's Asset Forfeiture Unit has seized assets belonging to businessman Edwin Sodi. Now, the AFU pounced on Sodi's fleet of luxury vehicles, which include a Ferrari, a Porsche, Bentley, and you name it. Sodi is one of the 7 accused charged with corruption in the Free State asbestos corruption scandal. Now, last Friday, the AFU also attached the house, cars and pension of former Housing Department HOD, that's Nthimotse Mokhesi. Now, joining us is Casper Badenhorst, and he is a senior associate at the Ulrich Roux Associates. Casper, good morning to you. So we've seen all of these seizures in the last couple of days. Questions on people's minds: what happens next?
Well, what is next is now essentially for the criminal matter to take its course. Obviously, they have now, it's very well aware that these assets have been attached, and that process of having attached the assets will now run in parallel with the criminal trial, which is currently in Bloemfontein. Once the process has been conducted, there will be a final determination at the very end of that. But these proceedings on their own will also allow for the persons affected by forfeiture or the preservation order to oppose the application.
If the case does go against the accused, so the matter is brought to finality and they are convicted, is what I'm saying, what happens to these assets? Does the state, particularly with immovable assets like property, what does the state do with those assets?
So the entire point of this initial process or the preservation order is to keep those assets which they feel are assets that have been purchased through the proceeds of unlawful activities. And for eventually, if they are convicted and they are found to have been obtained by those unlawful proceedings, then those assets may be sold in order to satisfy the debt which they or allege is owing, or at least the funds that have been stolen through corruption and fraud in this case. So all in all, at the very end of it, if they can satisfy the debt, which I say is 300 million rand, they'll be able to sell all the vehicles, the immovable property, funds which are in trust at the moment. They'll be able to sell those, which are currently being held by a curator.
You mentioned the property or the assets that could possibly be held in trust. For example, the house, we read at the weekend through the newspapers that it is actually held under a trust, the 80 million rand plus house where Mr. Sodi is understood to have been living. Is it going to be that easy to sell that property which is held in a trust?
Sorry, can you just repeat that? The connection's slightly bad.
All right, I'm just going to try and see if I can repeat that question. The house, we understand that Edwin Sodi is living in, that 87 or 85 million rand house, it's understood to be held in a trust. How easy or difficult is it going to be for law enforcement to convert that into money that can then contribute toward that 300 million that the state seeks to recover?
Well, the trust in essence will have to be disposed of at a certain point. I mean, if they do find that the proceeds, or at least the house, was purchased with the proceeds, it will just go through a process where that trust is liquidated, dissipated, and they'll be able to sell the assets that are held by the trust. Just as the same with the vehicles. I mean, they will put it on an auction and just sell it off. And that's how they will go about that process. So it applies to assets held in trust. Obviously, the trustees will have been given notification of this issue. I mean, all people that are have some sort of interest, including creditors that have interest in assets, will have been given notice.
Yeah.
And once there's a final determination and understanding, or at least reasonable grounds to understand that these assets have been purchased with the proceeds, then they'll be able to sell it off in auction. And that includes, as I say, the immovable property.
Yeah. What about monies possibly held in offshore accounts? How easy will it be for the state to recover those?
Well, the curator, in essence, takes over all of that. So, signing rights, if you will, of bank accounts. And eventually it all comes down to being able to prove that those funds are proceeds. I mean, that is the connecting factor in this entire issue. If they are able to determine that, I mean, bank accounts that are held offshore, there will always be an order that will be able to be obtained to have those funds, and if it's actual cash, to be forfeited to the state.
All right. Casper Badenhorst, he is a senior associate at the Ulrich Roux Associates. Thank you very much for making that clear for us, and all this activity that has been going on these past couple of days. It's important for us to wrap our heads around and find out exactly what it is that the state is going to do with that. So that's the explanation from Casper.